What happens when a CEO trades his office view for a mop bucket and uncovers something he never thought he'd hear? Miles Carter stood by the window of his corner office, arms crossed, staring out at a skyline he once dreamed of. 10 years ago, he'd bought a small but promising cafe chain from a retiring couple. Now it had 10 locations scattered across the city. Business was steady, profits healthy, but something felt off lately. He'd been getting vague complaints. A few online reviews mentioned rude staff, slow service, and an uncomfortable vibe at one specific location, Store 6, a mid-sized cafe on the edge of downtown. Nothing too alarming, but too consistent to ignore. The district manager, Lewis, brushed it off. Just a couple of whiny customers, he'd said. The place runs fine. But Miles had learned to stop trusting filtered reports. He'd never met most of the store managers or frontline staff personally. The company had grown fast, and he'd become more of a strategist than a presence. That had to change, so he came up with a plan. 2 days later, a man named Mike walked into Store 6 wearing a faded polo, khakis, and a name tag that read trainee. His thick beard, glasses, and shaved head made him unrecognizable. He'd grown the beard out for months, ditched the suits, and even changed his voice. He'd arranged the whole thing through corporate HR, telling the location manager that a new trainee was being sent for a week as part of a new program. No one questioned it. Store 6 had gone through 3 hires in 6 weeks due to staff quitting. They were short-staffed and desperate for help. "Hey, you Mike," a bored voice called from behind the counter. A tall man in his early 30s, wearing a manager's badge, barely looked up from his tablet. He had slicked back hair and a permanent frown. "Yeah," Miles replied, gripping the mop handle he'd been given. "Ready to learn, that's fine, just don't get in the way." The man walked off without even introducing himself. Miles glanced around the cafe. It had potential big windows, cozy booths, but the energy was low. A few customers sat in silence. The music was off. 2 baristas behind the counter exchanged tired glances, moving like their feet were made of lead. He started sweeping near the entrance, keeping his head down but ears open. "Excuse me," an older woman asked quietly. "Is there any almond milk left?" One of the baristas, a girl with a shaky voice and kind eyes, smiled and said, "Let me check for you, ma'am. I think we're out, but I'll double check." She disappeared into the back. Just then, the manager leaned over to another employee and said, not bothering to lower his voice, "Watch this. Wendy's gonna bend over backwards again for that lady, like we're running a 5-star hotel." The other worker snorted. Miles froze mid-sweep. The girl returned with a small carton. "Found one more," she said cheerfully. "Would you like that warmed up?" The customer beamed. "That would be wonderful, dear." As Wendy turned to prep the drink, the manager made a loud coughing noise and muttered, "Teacher's pet," just loud enough for the nearby workers to hear. One of them chuckled. Wendy didn't react, but Miles saw her shoulders tense. He kept sweeping. His jaw clenched. By day 2, he saw enough. The manager, whose name tag read Tyler, rarely did any actual work. He barked orders, took long breaks, and belittled employees in subtle jabs. He wasn't outright cruel, but he chipped away at people's pride. The cafe had no music because it distracted workers. No team meetings, no encouragement, just cold efficiency. Wendy, on the other hand, showed up early both mornings. She restocked the pastry case without being asked. She offered to cover a shift for a sick coworker. She even helped clean the bathroom during a rush. "Why do you put up with him?" Miles asked her quietly when they were both wiping tables. She looked at him, surprised by the question. "He doesn't scare me," she said. "I just focus on the customers. It's not forever." Miles nodded. "Still, doesn't seem fair." "Life's not fair," she smiled gently, "but kindness goes a long way." That night, Miles sat in his car longer than usual. He questioned himself. Had he let the company grow too far from its roots? Was he too focused on numbers and not enough on people? The next morning, he showed up early again. Wendy was already there, prepping trays with a headset around her neck, wiping the counter while humming quietly. The store was calm, warm even. Then Tyler walked in. Late. He glanced at Miles and said, "Yo, Mike, you're still mopping. Thought you'd quit by now." Miles didn't answer. Tyler turned to another worker and said, "You ever notice how Wendy acts like she owns the place? I swear she thinks being nice is gonna get her promoted." "Like anyone's ever gonna promote her," he laughed. Miles stopped moving. He dropped the mop, walked over slowly, and stood in front of Tyler. "You think that's funny?" he asked. Tyler looked confused. "What? You think mocking your own team in front of other employees is okay?" Tyler scoffed. "Dude, relax, it's a joke." Miles pulled off his badge, then the glasses, then the fake beard. "Silence. I'm Miles Carter," he said. "I own this company and you're done here." Tyler's mouth opened, then closed. He looked around. No one defended him. "But wait, you're the CEO. You're fired." As of this moment, Tyler's face drained of color. Miles turned to the rest of the staff. "Everyone take 10. We're having a real talk next." The silence in the cafe stretched long after Tyler stormed out. No one moved, no one spoke. The air felt frozen, like everyone was trying to figure out if what just happened was real. Miles finally turned to the group. His voice was calm, but it carried weight now that his identity was known. "Let's reset. Take a 10-minute break if you need it. Then we talk." He walked into the back office, a cramped room with an old desk and a flickering overhead light. There was a chair, but he didn't sit. Instead, he stood with his hands on the edge of the desk, breathing slowly, trying to organize what had to happen next. A few minutes later, the employees trickled in. Wendy first, followed by the others. Jordan, a quiet barista with a sleeve of tattoos. Priya, who handled most of the kitchen prep. And Marcus, the newest hire who barely looked 18. They sat around the room, glancing at one another. No one looked angry, just tired. Miles looked at them one by one. "I'm not here to fire anyone else," he said. "I'm here to understand what's been happening and how we fix it. You've all been carrying something I should have seen a long time ago." Wendy folded her hands in her lap. "We didn't expect you to show up like that. Honestly, I thought you were just another guy who wouldn't last." Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "He made it hard for anyone to want to stay. I almost didn't come back after my second shift." Jordan nodded. "He'd call people out in front of customers. I've worked kitchens before. I know tough bosses, but that wasn't about standards, that was just control." Miles listened without interrupting. Priya spoke next. "He started cutting corners with inventory. Told us not to tell customers when we were out of something, just fake it with substitutions. It's why we've had people get upset." Miles's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, fake it?" He'd say to just hand off regular milk if someone asked for oat. Said they'd never know the difference. Miles felt his stomach tighten. "Is that still happening?" "No," Wendy said. "I started telling customers the truth. He didn't like it." Miles looked at her. "Why didn't you escalate that?" She hesitated. "I didn't think anyone would listen." "He told us he spoke for corporate, that you didn't care about day-to-day stuff, that it was all about margins." "I never said that," Miles said. "I know that now." He took a breath. "You shouldn't have had to protect this place on your own." Wendy shrugged. "I just didn't want to be the reason people stopped coming." Miles turned to the others. "Did anyone report this outside the store?" Jordan shook his head. "He told us complaints went straight to him. Said if we tried to go around him, he'd make sure it came back on us." Miles walked to the door and shut it. "Effective immediately, I'm appointing an interim supervisor here. We'll do a formal hiring process soon, but for now, Wendy, if you're willing, I'd like you to take that role." Wendy blinked. "Me? You've been leading without a title. Let's make it official." She looked around at her coworkers. No one objected. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it. But only if we get some help in here. We're running on fumes." "You will," Miles said. "I'll have someone from our HR team reach out today. We'll start interviews by the end of the week." Marcus raised his hand slightly. "Is it true you used to run the whole company by yourself?" "I started small," Miles said. "One cafe, then I bought another, then another. I built this from scratch, but somewhere along the line I stopped showing up like I used to. That's on me." Wendy looked at him. "What made you come to this store?" He didn't hesitate. Too many reviews used the word cold. That's not who we are. Jordan tilted his head. Is this happening at other stores? I don't know yet, Miles said. That's why I started here. He paused. I stayed under the radar because I wanted the truth. I got it. Now it's my job to make sure none of you carry the weight alone again. They returned to the front together. The cafe had stayed quiet during the meeting. A few customers sat reading or typing on laptops. One woman at the counter looked confused, waiting for service. Wendy stepped behind the register without missing a beat. "Welcome in," she said. "Sorry for the wait. What can I get started for you?" Miles watched as the line began to move smoothly again. Wendy took the order, called it back to Jordan, who already had the espresso machine running. Priya handed off a fresh tray of pastries from the back. Marcus wiped down a table near the window. The shift felt different, not perfect, but different. At noon, Miles sat at one of the booths and pulled out his phone. He called Melanie, the head of HR. "I need a full audit on all store-level managers. Focus on staff turnover, customer complaints, and unreported inventory issues." "Understood," she said. "And we need to fast-track hiring for Store 6. They're down at least 2 people. I'll have listings posted this afternoon." He hung up and looked around again. A young father came in with a toddler. Wendy greeted them both by name. The kid laughed when she handed over a cookie sample. Miles stood and walked behind the counter. "Wendy," he said quietly, "can you step out for a moment?" She followed him to the side hallway near the stock room. "I want to put something else in motion," he said. "A pilot program, leadership development for internal staff." "You'd be the first," she blinked. "I've never run anything. You already are." "I don't have a degree. You have integrity." She looked away, unsure. "What if I mess it up? Then we fix it together." Her eyes met his. "Okay," he nodded. "You'll start with extra hours for training. Paid, obviously. And if you decide this isn't for you down the line, that's fine, but I think you've got more to offer than you realize." She gave a small nod. "Thank you. No, thank you." That afternoon, Miles stayed behind the counter. He brewed coffee, restocked lids, and cleared dishes. Customers came and went. Some looked surprised to see a man in his 50s wiping tables, but no one said anything. Around 4, a delivery driver came in carrying the wrong order. It was addressed to another store, but the invoice had Store 6's name on it. Wendy caught it immediately. "Wrong location," she told him. "This is for Westfield." The driver looked annoyed. "Dispatch told me here." Wendy didn't argue. She just called the Westfield manager, confirmed the mix-up, and got it sorted in 4 minutes. Miles watched the entire exchange. After the driver left, he said, "That could have gone sideways." "Could have," she agreed. "But yelling doesn't speed anything up," he smiled. "You're going to do just fine." By closing time, the energy in the cafe had shifted entirely. The team moved with more ease. They joked quietly as they cleaned. Jordan played a playlist through the speaker system, something mellow but warm. No one asked for permission. It just happened. As Wendy locked the front door, she turned to Miles. "You coming in again tomorrow?" Miles shook his head. "Not as a trainee," she raised an eyebrow, "but I'll stop by, this time through the front door." She smiled and nodded. He turned and stepped into the cool evening air. The street buzzed with the low rhythm of after-work traffic. But for the first time in a long while, Miles didn't rush to leave. He stood outside the cafe and watched the lights inside flicker off one by one. He finally understood what those reviews had meant. It wasn't just about poor service or long lines. It was about people feeling unwelcome. He'd built something that people once loved. Somewhere along the way, it had started to fade. But now it was starting to feel like home again. The next morning, Miles parked a block from Store 6 and approached on foot, coffee in hand, wearing a plain button-up and jeans. The disguise was gone, but he didn't want to draw attention. From across the street, he watched as Wendy unlocked the cafe. She pulled the door open, checked the sidewalk for trash, and stepped inside, keys jangling at her hip. She was alone. Again, he crossed over and tapped gently on the glass. She looked up, then waved him in. "The others called out," she said without preamble. Jordan's got strep, Priya's kid is sick, and Marcus texted that he's stuck waiting for his brother to bring the car. Miles nodded. You okay handling it until help arrives? Wendy tied her apron tighter. I'll do what I can. But we're gonna feel it at the register. I'll help where I can. HR's sending someone from another location for support, but they won't be here until 10. She glanced at the clock. It was barely 6:45. I'll start setting up the register. Can you handle pastry trays? On it. By 7:15, the line was out the door. Miles took orders while Wendy prepped drinks, working with a calm efficiency that belied the strain on her face. A customer spilled their coffee near the cream station. Miles grabbed a cloth and cleaned it up without a word. No one recognized him. A woman in her 40s leaned across the counter and whispered, "You're new, right?" Much friendlier than the last guy. Miles didn't react, just nodded and handed her a receipt. By 10, the temporary reinforcements arrived, a team member named Alina from the Westfield location. She was quick and clearly experienced, dropping her things in the back and tying her apron before even greeting the others. "Where do you need me?" she asked Wendy. "Register 3. It's been dead since the card reader went down. We've been funneling everyone through one." Alina nodded and got to work. During a lull, Miles stepped into the back office and dialed Melanie again. "We've got to move up the equipment refresh. That card reader's been down too long. I'll flag the service team. You want it replaced or repaired?" "Replaced. No patch jobs." He hung up and returned to the front. The line had settled, but the room still buzzed with tension. Wendy was at the espresso machine, wiping the wand between drinks, her movements slower now. He stepped beside her. "Take 15. You need it." She shook her head. "Not yet. Let me get through this next wave. You're no good to anyone if you burn out." She hesitated, then gave a slight nod and stepped into the back. Alina took over without missing a beat. Miles leaned in. "You've worked with her before." Alina didn't look up. "Never met her, but she's sharp. Does half the work without being asked. Any issues settling in?" "Not yet, but this place feels tense." "How so?" "Everyone's too quiet, no chatter. It's like they're waiting for something bad to happen." Miles glanced around. She was right. Even with Tyler gone, the air hadn't fully cleared. "I'll be in back," he said. Wendy was sitting on a crate near the dry storage rack, sipping water from a paper cup. Her hair was tied back tighter than usual, and she'd pulled off her apron. She didn't look up when he walked in. "You were right," she said. "This isn't sustainable." He leaned against the wall. "No, it's not. I'm not saying I want out, but you've got to understand it's not just about replacing one bad manager. It's about everything he left behind." "I do understand. That's why I'm here." She looked over. "I appreciate the offer yesterday, the leadership training. But right now I need bodies, not a promotion." "I agree. We've got 3 interviews lined up for tomorrow. One's a referral from the Midtown location. If they check out, we can onboard them by Friday." She nodded slowly. "That'll help," he hesitated. "You said something yesterday, that it wasn't forever." She gave a tired laugh. "I still believe that. I just didn't think forever would feel this long. I want to offer you something else, not a title, a resource. Starting next week, every store will have a direct line to someone in operations. Not through district managers, straight to someone who can act." She raised a brow. "You're scrapping the district layer, reworking it. Too much authority in too few hands. We're decentralizing decision-making. Local teams will have more say." Wendy leaned forward. "What happens to Lewis?" "He's under review. I've read his reports. They gloss over too much. He knew about the milk switch. I overheard him tell Tyler not to make it a thing." Miles's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you say that yesterday?" She shrugged. "Didn't know if it mattered." "It does now." He pulled out his phone and fired off a message to Melanie. "Set up a meeting with Lewis today." Wendy stood and straightened her shirt. "I should get back. Take 5 more. I'll cover." She didn't argue this time. As the day wore on, the rhythm of Store 6 found a fragile balance. Alina picked up quickly, helping Marcus, who had finally arrived around noon, get caught up. The line moved steadily, and the atmosphere began to shift. It wasn't cheerful, but it was functional. At 2, Miles stepped out front to take a call. Melanie answered on the first ring. "Lewis is in the building. You want him patched in?" "No, I'll come to him." He drove to the corporate office and walked straight to the 3rd floor. Lewis sat behind his desk, scrolling through a tablet. He looked up, surprised. "Didn't expect you in today." Close the tablet. Lewis did, sitting up straighter. "We need to talk about Store 6. Lewis exhaled slowly. "Look, I know the numbers aren't great, but this isn't about numbers. It's about what you allowed to happen. Staff were instructed to lie to customers. You knew." Lewis blinked. "That's not how I remember, don't lie." Lewis shifted in his seat. "I told Tyler to fix it quietly. I didn't want to escalate something that could be handled in-house. That's not leadership, that's avoidance. I've been managing 10 locations. I can't know the details of every stop. You knew enough to intervene, you chose not to. And you misrepresented conditions in your reports." Lewis sat back, visibly sweating now. "I can fix it. You won't get the chance. Your access is suspended, effective immediately." Lewis opened his mouth, but Miles was already standing. "I'll have HR contact you about next steps." He walked out without another word. Back in his car, he didn't feel triumphant, just clear. This wasn't about punishing one person. It was about cutting out decay before it spread further. He returned to Store 6 just before close. Wendy was printing end-of-day reports. She looked up. "Everything all right?" "Handled." She didn't press for details. He stepped behind the counter and grabbed a towel, wiping down the espresso station. "You know," he said eventually, "when I opened my first cafe, I used to do every closing shift. I knew the sound of the milk steamer better than my own ringtone. What changed? I got busy. Then successful. Then removed. You're here now. I won't disappear again." She nodded once, then turned back to the register. As the last customer left, Marcus flipped the sign to closed. Elena stacked the chairs with practiced speed. The team moved quietly, efficiently, not out of fear but habit. When the lights dimmed and the door locked, Miles lingered outside. The others filtered out, offering quiet goodbyes. Wendy was last. She didn't say much, just stood beside him on the sidewalk. "You going home?" she asked. "In a bit." "You need anything?" "No, just taking it in." She gave a small nod and started walking. Halfway down the block, she paused and turned. "Tomorrow's going to be better," she said. "I know," he replied. Then she kept walking, and he stood still, watching the reflection of the cafe in the darkened glass. For the first time in a long while, it looked like something worth showing up for again. The following week began with a quiet hum at Store 6. The changes hadn't fixed everything overnight, but the environment was steadier. Hiring was still underway. Miles had made sure of that. But for now, the team was holding the line with grit and short breaks between rushes. Miles returned mid-morning Monday, not undercover, not unannounced. This time, he walked through the front door with a clipboard, a simple shirt, and the kind of presence that didn't demand attention but drew it anyway. Wendy looked up from the register, gave a quick nod, then went back to helping a customer. He didn't interrupt. Instead, he pulled up a chair near the window and began reviewing the new training materials being piloted across the company. The idea was to build internal leadership, and the first rollout would start here. Wendy had agreed to lead it with hesitation, but that was all he needed. Hesitation meant she cared enough to question it. Indifference would have worried him. Elena, still filling in from Westfield, approached him during a lull. "Mind if I say something? Go ahead. This team doesn't need a cheerleader. They need breathing room. They're good just stretched thin." "I know. 2 more hires start Thursday. One's a barista from another location who asked for a transfer. The other's brand new, but she's already certified on prep and service." Elena nodded. "Good, just don't put it all on Wendy. She's capable, but she's still human. She won't be alone." He glanced toward the kitchen, where Wendy was showing Marcus how to calibrate the espresso grinder. She wasn't giving orders, she was asking questions, letting him walk through the steps. When he got something right, she didn't praise him loudly, but she patted his shoulder and moved on. Encouragement without spectacle. When the lunch crowd began to swell, Miles offered to jump in. Wendy waved him toward the register. "Just don't mess up the loyalty points," she said, half joking. He handled the orders while she managed the floor. It wasn't smooth. Marcus fumbled a few drink tickets, and Elena had to remake a sandwich after a mix-up, but the energy was different than it had been a week ago. People corrected mistakes without fear. No one was snapping or muttering under their breath. At one point, a middle-aged man in a suit approached the counter, frustrated. "I ordered a cappuccino 15 minutes ago," he said, voice sharp. "Still don't have it." Miles checked the screen. His order had been bumped down during a printer jam. "That's on us," Miles said. "I'll make it myself right now." "I don't care who makes it, just get it right." The man turned and walked off. Wendy had caught the exchange from a few feet away. "Do you want me to handle that?" "I've got it." He made the drink, slid it into a tray, and carried it to the man's table. "Apologies again. The machine jammed earlier. It won't happen again." The man barely glanced up. "You're not the manager, right?" "No, sir." "But I'm responsible for what happens here." Only then did the man look him in the eye. "You're the owner?" "Yes." The man's posture shifted slightly. "Didn't expect that." Miles didn't respond. He just nodded and walked away. Later that afternoon, Melanie arrived to observe the store and gather feedback on the pilot program. She took a seat near the back, watching how the team operated. After an hour, she joined Miles near the loading area behind the kitchen. "They're recovering," she said. "Slower than I thought, but steady." "They were never broken," Miles replied, "just pushed too far without support." "You want me to pull Elena back to Westfield?" "Not yet. Let her stay through Friday. She's helping more than she realizes." Melanie hesitated. "And what about Lewis?" HR finalized the report. "His exit's confirmed. He won't be returning in any capacity." "Understood." Wendy stepped into the back, wiping her hands on a towel. "Can I borrow you both for a sec?" She led them back to the front, where a customer, a man in his 20s with a messenger bag and a laptop, was standing near the counter, visibly upset. "He says he was short-changed," Wendy said quietly. "He's claiming he paid with a 50. Miles stepped forward. "Hi, I'm Miles. Let's get this sorted." The man lowered his voice. "I handed her a 50. She gave me change for a 20. Wendy nodded. "He's pointing to Priya's drawer." "She's on register too." Miles leaned toward the till, counting slowly. The drawer was off by $30, but not over. "Under, you're right," Miles said. "We owe you 30 more." He handed the man a pair of 20s and took back the original 10. "Apologies. We'll review our process." The man nodded, still clearly irritated but mollified. He left without another word. Miles turned to Wendy. "That's the first drawer short today?" "Yeah, I already pulled the logs. Priya handled 3 cash orders before that one. One of them was messy. She had to void twice. Let's talk to her." They found Priya in the back, scrubbing the prep counter. Miles didn't raise his voice. Drawer 2 came up short. She froze, then turned slowly. "I swear I didn't take anything." "I believe you," he said. "But we need to walk through what happened." She explained the earlier transaction. A customer had changed their order mid-payment, and she'd had to void 2 items, re-enter one, and refund the rest. She'd done it manually because the system had lagged. It was plausible, messy, but not malicious. Wendy listened, arms folded. "We should pull her off register until we're sure," Miles agreed. "You'll stay on prep and support for now. No write-up, just caution." Priya nodded silently, clearly shaken. Wendy waited until she left, then turned to Miles. "We're walking a tight line. If one more person calls out, we're back where we started. I've got backup on standby, and I'm working on a permanent assistant manager for you, someone with experience in locations like this." "Good," Wendy said, "because I'm not trying to be a hero. I just want to go home not dreading the next morning. You shouldn't have to be a hero to hold a job." That evening, after close, Miles gathered the team for a short meeting. They stood around the front counter, some leaning against stools, others nursing the last of their coffee. "I want to say something," he began. "This store's been through more in the last month than most do in a year, and you're still standing. That matters." No one said anything, but Wendy glanced around, making sure everyone was listening. "I'm not here to give a speech," Miles continued. "Just a promise. This isn't the end of something, it's the start. You'll get the support you need, you'll get the hires, and you'll get the same basic respect you've earned 100 times over." Marcus raised a hand slightly. "Are we going to get another Tyler? No. You're going to get someone who listens. And if they don't, you come to me, directly." Elena stepped forward. "A lot of us came here expecting clock in, clock out, but the way people treated each other, it wasn't just bad management, it was personal." "It won't be again," Miles said. "Not here. Not on my watch." No applause followed, no big moment, just a collective exhale. Wendy turned off the music, the last task of the day. As they filed out into the cool night air, Miles locked the door behind them. He stood there a moment longer, keys in hand, watching the reflection of the streetlights in the glass. The cafe didn't look perfect, but it looked real, and that was enough.